For 3 years, I let my husband believe I was nothing more than the quiet wife he could ignore. Then he walked into a billion-dollar sale with his mistress on his arm and tried to sell the company I secretly owned. I was not in the front row that night. I was not at the investor table. I was not standing beside him for the cameras. Every major line of code, every emergency capital bridge, and every cloud license that made Prometheus AI valuable had passed through my hands long before he learned how to say founder without flinching. I was sitting near the back of the gala room, half hidden behind a column, wearing a black dress Ethan's mother had called too plain for a woman married to a CEO. Vanessa Reed was beside him instead. She had one hand tucked lightly through his arm, her blonde bob shining under the chandeliers, her champagne silk dress catching every flash from the photographers. She looked exactly like the story Ethan wanted the world to believe. Polished, young, brilliant, grateful. The kind of woman a man could point to and say, "This is the future." No one looked at me twice. That was the arrangement Ethan had grown comfortable with. In public, I was Liv Cole, the wife who kept quiet, smiled when required, and vanished when the important people arrived. On paper, where it mattered, I had never been Liv Cole at all. On paper, I was Olivia Sinclair. And by the end of that night, the difference between those two names would cost my husband everything. The first time I lived through that night, I did what Ethan told me to do. I wore the gray dress he laid out on the bed. I stood near the back. I smiled when his mother pinched my sleeve and told me not to embarrass the family. I watched Vanessa touch his arm in public with the ease of a woman who had already been given permission in private. I listened while men congratulated him for technology he could not have explained without my notes in his pocket. By midnight, he was rich. By the end of that year, I was divorced. By the end of the next, my grandmother was dead. My name had been buried under emergency filings, and Prometheus AI had been sold for a number large enough to make strangers call Ethan a visionary. And by the last night of my first life, I was sitting on the bare floor of a stripped penthouse, watching him laugh on television beside the woman who had helped destroy my family. There was nothing left in that apartment except dust, a forgotten television, and my phone. Vanessa had left a voicemail. I played it until the words stopped sounding like words and started sounding like a verdict. "You really thought he loved you?" she said, almost gently. "You were the quiet little wife we needed, soft enough to keep the compute cheap, proud enough not to ask why your grandmother kept getting sicker." Then she laughed. Not a big laugh. That would have been easier to hate. It was small, intimate, amused by how cleanly I had misunderstood my own life. "Evelyn's decline was never as natural as the doctors made it sound, darling. Mr. Holt needed the old woman quiet before she could sign the wrong name. Nothing personal. Well, a little personal." I did not cry. I had cried in court. I had cried in hospital corridors. I had cried in bathrooms during charity dinners while Ethan told reporters that Vanessa understood his work in a way I never could. By that last night, grief had worn itself out against the walls of me. Something in my chest simply stopped fighting. The television kept playing. Ethan looked free. Vanessa looked adored. The city outside the glass looked expensive and indifferent. The last thing I remember from that life was thinking, very clearly, that I had not been beaten because I was weak. I had been beaten because I kept waiting for the people who used me to be ashamed of themselves. Then the room went white. I woke up drowning in sunlight. My hands clawed at sheets I knew had been sold at auction. My breath tore out of me so hard it hurt. For a few seconds, I thought death had given me a cruel dream. The old bedroom, the white walls, the wedding ring on my finger, the faint smell of Ethan's cedar cologne hanging near the mirror. Then I saw the calendar, the morning of the Vance signing gala, 3 years earlier, the day Ethan had begun selling my life back to me in pieces. I sat up so fast the room tilted. My hands were smooth. No bruises, no hospital tape marks, no tremor from the medication Vanessa's helpful doctor had pressed into my grandmother's care plan. I touched my face, my throat, my hair. Whole, young, alive. The door opened before I could decide whether to scream. Ethan came in half-dressed, working a tie at the mirror, not looking at me. In that first moment, I felt something so old and stupid rise in me that I almost hated myself for it. He was 3 years younger, cleaner around the eyes, still handsome in the dangerous way of men who have not yet paid for anything. "Cars at 9, he said. "Wear the gray. The blue washes you out on camera," Vanessa noticed. My first life had trained me to absorb that name without reacting. Vanessa noticed. Vanessa always noticed. The color of my dress, the softness of my voice, the account numbers on old Helios invoices, the timing of my grandmother's medication, the weakness of a woman who mistook humiliation for patience. Ethan adjusted his cuffs. "Tonight matters. Serious people. Stay near the back, smile, and don't talk numbers." In the old life I had said, "Of course." That was the voice he expected from me. Liv Cole. Small, useful, grateful to be included in rooms built with my money. This time I looked at him until he felt it. "Don't worry, Ethan," I said. "Tonight, no one's going to be looking at you at all." His hands stopped on the tie. For 1 second he really saw me, and I watched him fail to place what he was seeing. "Get dressed," he said. He left faster than he came. When the door clicked shut, I let one tear fall. Not for him, not for the marriage. For the woman who had died on a bare floor with nothing but proof in her hand, and no one left alive who loved her enough to understand it. Then I picked up my phone and called my grandmother. Evelyn Sinclair answered on the second ring. Hearing her voice almost ruined me. My grandmother had never sounded gentle. Even when I was a child, she spoke as if the whole world were a badly run board meeting, and she had arrived late on purpose. Frost and fire. That was Evelyn. Hearing that voice again, alive and impatient, nearly took my knees out from under me. "Olivia," she said, "you do remember civilized people call after breakfast." I pressed a hand over my mouth and swallowed 3 years of grief in one breath. "Grandmother," I said, "I need you to listen carefully, and I need you not to ask me how I know." There was a pause. Evelyn had always heard weather before other people saw clouds. "Go on. Do not take any new medication this week. If a new doctor turns up, no matter who recommends him, send him away. Do not let anyone from Holt's office near your medical file. Not a lawyer. Not a physician. Not an old friend of an old friend." The silence changed. "That is a very specific warning." "Yes. Is this about Marcus Holt?" I closed my eyes. In another life, I had not heard that name until it was too late. Evelyn had known the snake by scent before I knew the floor was moving. "It is about Holt. It is about Ethan. It is about Prometheus. And it is about every Sinclair document you have not signed yet." "Child," she said, voice going dry, "that sounds like war." "It is a war we already lost once." I heard her breathe in. I should not have said that. It was too much, too strange. But Evelyn had never punished me for truth delivered badly. "What do you need?" my grandmother asked. "Get the immediate control packet ready. Temporary voting proxy, durable power of attorney, medical directive, board authorization. Anything that proves I can step in if someone tries to have you declared unfit before the originals surface. No gasp, no waste." "And Helios Cloud?" she asked. "Ready to move on my word. Capital notice first, compute breach second, everything through council." "Olivia." The old command in her voice made me open my eyes. "If you pull Sinclair Capital from Prometheus and put Helios on notice, you do not wound your husband. You expose the machine. Investors will panic. His sale will collapse. People will come for you. Let them." "That is not an answer. It's the only one I have left." For a moment, all I could hear was my own pulse. Then my grandmother said, softer than I had ever heard her, "You sound like your mother when she finally stopped asking permission." That hurt worse than I expected. "Stay alive," I told her. "Give me a reason." "Tonight." I hung up before my voice broke. Ethan had left the gray dress on the bed. It lay there like a uniform for someone else's obedience. Before I touched it, I called Sinclair counsel from the bathroom with the shower running, rush filings, divorce papers, corporate notices, a courier who did not ask questions. By late afternoon, the parts that could be signed without Evelyn's originals were signed. I pushed it aside and reached to the back of the closet, where a black dress still hung with the tag on it. Sharp shoulders, clean lines, severe enough for a funeral, elegant enough for a coronation. The first time, I had dressed to disappear. This time, I dressed like the last thing some of those people would ever want to see. When I walked into the gala that night, 300 of the most important people in technology were already pretending not to watch each other panic. The atrium was all marble, glass, flowers, and money. At the far end, a screen the size of a wall announced Prometheus AI. A new era. Ethan's face appeared in the looping promo reel, thoughtful and clean-shaven, the founder as future saint. There were clips of server farms he did not own, cloud infrastructure he could not pay for without Sinclair capital, model architecture copied from notebooks he had once called my little math hobby. And there was Vanessa. She saw me by the coat check and came over with a flute of champagne in one hand. Her smile was warm enough to fool anyone who had never been cut with it. "You came," she said. Her eyes moved over the black dress. "Back tables are that way, sweetheart. The front is reserved for people who move the deal." In my first life, I had gone to the back. This time, I set my untouched glass on her tray and walked past her. The room did not part for me all at once. It registered me in pieces. The black dress, the stillness, the lack of apology in my steps. A few people glanced up. Then a senior partner from one of the largest sovereign funds in the room saw my face, froze mid-sentence, and set down his drink. He bowed. Not deep, not theatrical. Enough. "Miss Sinclair," he said, "forgive me. We were not told you would be attending." The name landed like dropped crystal. Sinclair. Conversations thinned. Heads turned. A few people looked from me to Ethan, who was across the room with Vanessa's hand near his sleeve. I watched the calculations start before the facts arrived. Founder. Wife. Sinclair. Helios. Capital. Compute. Ethan reached me in 4 long strides, his public smile nailed to his face. "What did you say to him?" he asked under his breath. "Nothing yet. Do you understand who that man is?" "Yes." His fingers closed around my elbow. I looked down at his hand. He let go before I made him. "Whatever this is," he said, "whatever you are to these people, use it. For the company. For us. For us." In my first life, those 2 words had been a leash. I wore them proudly. I called it marriage. "Get on your stage," I said. "Announce your deal." The far doors opened before he could answer, and Julian Vance walked in. People like to say a room changes when power enters it. That is not quite true. A room changes when power enters and does not need to perform. Julian did not hurry. He did not scan for approval. He moved through billionaires and ministers like a man crossing his own garden. Ethan stepped forward with the eager hand of a founder about to become very rich. Julian walked past it. He stopped in front of me. For a second, I saw the boy from my grandmother's veranda, the one who lost chess with fury and grace. The one who called me Liv before that name belonged to a marriage that tried to shrink me. "Liv?" he said. Then his eyes dropped to my wedding ring, to Ethan hovering behind me, and the softness left his face. "It's you," he said quietly. Vanessa had gone still. Not shocked. That was important. Vanessa had known enough of my identity to use me. She knew Helios. She knew Sinclair. She had not expected me to wear it in public like armor. She stepped close enough that only I could hear her. "Aren't you a clever little secret?" she murmured. "Does your grandmother know what you've been hiding?" "Fragile thing, Evelyn. Bad heart," I heard. There it was, the blade under the silk. In another life, that threat had arrived as a voicemail after the damage was done. This time it stood close enough for me to smell her perfume. I smiled at her. For the first time that night, Vanessa looked uncertain. Ethan dragged me into a private lounge before the room could decide what it had just seen. He shut the door with too much force. Outside, hundreds of people murmured around the shape of my name. "You know Julian Vance," he said. I said nothing. He doesn't cross rooms for people. He doesn't bow. Whatever the two of you are, old money, old family, I do not care. You leverage it tonight. The deal is not fully papered. If Vance thinks the founder's wife is somebody, the number goes up. There it was again. My value, once he discovered it, immediately became something he could spend. "This is the best thing that ever happened to us," he said. "Don't waste it being strange." "For us," I said. "Yes, for us." "You keep saying that." I opened my clutch and took out the papers Sinclair Counsel had rushed through that afternoon. Signed, notarized, clean, final. I set them on the bar between us. He picked them up with irritation. Then he read the first page, and the color drained from his face by degrees. "What is this?" "Me doing the one thing you were too greedy to do tonight." His eyes jumped to the signature line. "You signed divorce papers?" I left first. He laughed once, but the sound had nowhere to land. "Olivia, be serious. You have nothing. No money of your own, no position, no name anyone here knows outside whatever little family trick you just pulled." I almost thanked him. There are moments when a person says exactly the sentence you need to hear. It is rarely true. It is useful anyway. "Goodbye, Ethan." I walked to the door, then stopped because some victories deserve a witness. I lifted my phone and called my grandmother. "Yes," I said when she answered. "He's exactly who he was. Do it." Ethan stared at me. "Send the Sinclair withdrawal notice tonight," I said. "Trigger the funding default. Have Helios issue breach notice on the compute agreement effective immediately. The cure window starts now." My grandmother did not ask if I was sure. "Done," she said. I lowered the phone. Ethan looked at me as if I had turned a key inside a wall he had thought was decorative. "You should get back out there," I told him. "You have a fortune to lose." The first alert hit before I reached the main floor. Then another. Then the front row began to glow blue with phones. Ethan took the stage anyway. Men like Ethan are raised to believe a microphone can repair anything. "Tonight," he began, gripping the podium, "Prometheus begins its next chapter with Vance Capital, and I want to thank." The wall screen behind him stuttered. His presentation vanished. In stark white text, 2 system notices appeared where his future had been. Helios Compute. Breach notice issued. Emergency capacity hold activated. Sinclair Capital. Funding commitment withdrawn. The sound that moved through the room was not a gasp. It was worse. It was the low, collective noise of money realizing it had been standing on a trapdoor. Vanessa rushed to the laptop at the side of the stage. Her hands flew over the keys. For the first time all night, the polish cracked. "She's cutting it," Vanessa said. "Ethan, the investor feed is showing the hold. The models don't have guaranteed capacity anymore." Ethan turned on her. "Then buy it back." Julian's voice came from below the stage, quiet enough that people leaned in. "You can't." He stood with his hands in his pockets, watching Ethan the way a doctor watches a bad diagnosis explain itself. "Helios is not for sale," Julian said. "Neither is the capital behind it. Both belong to one person." He looked at me then. "Not Liv. Not the little girl from the veranda. Not the wife at the edge of the room. Olivia Sinclair. Vance Capital does not buy a building someone's only been renting," he said. "My counsel has already flagged the material adverse change clause. The deal is off." I stepped into the light near the stage. The room went still. "You were selling a company that was never yours, Ethan," I said. I did not raise my voice. I had spent too many years raising my voice in rooms where no one wanted to hear me. Quiet worked better when people were afraid of missing something expensive. The capital was mine. The compute was mine. The breakthroughs your investors applaud were solved at our kitchen table at 2 a.m. I handed them to you. I let you wear them to work like a coat. His mouth opened. No answer came out. You married an empire, I said, and you were ashamed of it at dinner. For 4 seconds, victory was clean. Then my phone rang. My grandmother's night nurse was crying so hard, I could barely understand her. Miss Sinclair, your grandmother collapsed. She's not responding. There are lawyers here. A man says there is an emergency order. He says the estate is frozen. Across the room, a secondary screen flickered as if someone had been waiting for the Sinclair name to become public. Emergency succession injunction filed. Petitioner, Marcus Holt. The room blurred at the edges. Holt had not waited for Evelyn to die. He had never needed to. He needed her declared unfit. He needed me positioned as an unimportant wife with no standing. He needed his own man appointed to manage her holdings on her behalf. Whoever voted my grandmother's controlling shares would run Sinclair. I had killed Ethan's deal in public, and Marcus Holt had used the moment I revealed myself to strike at the root. By the time I reached my grandmother's house, Evelyn was awake, furious, and wearing an oxygen tube like an insult. She sat propped in a chair in her study, a blanket over her knees, her face pale and her eyes entirely clear. Marcus Holt finally stopped circling and bit, she said as I came in. I wondered when he would get bored. I went to my knees in front of her before I could stop myself. Grandmother, do not look at me like that. I am not dead, and I refuse to be dramatic before dessert. I laughed once. It broke in the middle. She took my hand. Her grip was all bone and will. Tell me what you need. Control. Then listen carefully. Her voice sharpened. Holt does not need to inherit anything. That was always the mistake people made with men like him. He needs me declared unfit so I cannot vote my own shares. He needs the real succession documents buried so you cannot step into my chair. And he needs his own guardian appointed to vote for me while I am supposedly protected. The will, I said. The will is one piece. The trust, the proxy, the medical directive, and the board authorization are the others. Power is never one document, Olivia. That is a fairy tale told by people who have never had to keep it. She leaned back, breath-catching. Your grandfather's name is carved over the door, she said. The mind was always mine. I let a man wear my work like a coat for 40 years, because it was easier. Then I watched you do the same thing with your husband, and I held my tongue because what kind of hypocrite teaches a lesson she never learned? The words hit harder than anger would have. Do not make my mistake twice in one bloodline, she said. I pressed her hand to my forehead. I won't. Outside that room, the people who had made me small were already gathering. Diane Cole, Ethan's mother, waited in the Sinclair Tower lobby the next afternoon as if the building owed her hospitality. She had once told a dinner party that I was a charity case her son had taken pity on. She said it while I stood beside her holding a tray of champagne glasses because she had mistaken my silence for permission. Now she rose with a smile stretched thin across panic. Olivia, darling, family is family. Surely we can discuss the compute temporarily, just to stabilize things, for the family's sake. You called me a charity case at your 60th birthday, I said, not slowing, in front of 40 people. Her smile flinched. Security will see you out. I kept walking. Julian fell into step beside me near the elevators. Still throwing people out of buildings you own, he said. Some things really do survive. I should have smiled. I was too tired. You knew last night, I said, when you walked away from the deal. I figured it out standing there. I've been chasing a ghost under the Helios contracts for a year. A backer with no name holding up an entire company from the shadows. He looked at me. I never imagined the ghost was you. Most people didn't. Most people are not as smart as they charge by the hour. He handed me a folder. I can't fight your family's war for you. Sinclair would reject an outsider's hand, and frankly, Sinclair would be right. But Vance can hold your outside debt long enough to keep Holt from starving you out. I opened the folder. Shell companies, debt lines, filing dates. One date stopped me cold. 4 years ago, 2 years before Prometheus, 18 months before my wedding. He didn't use my marriage, I said slowly. He built the cage first. Ethan was just the door he left open. Julian said nothing. He knew when silence was kinder than comfort. That night, Ethan found my notebooks. I know because he told me later, but I also know because of the way Prometheus changed the next morning. People were careful around him in a new way. Engineers who had once pretended not to know where the ideas came from stopped pretending quite so hard. He had opened the bottom drawer of his own desk, the one he had ignored for years. Inside was the neat stack of notebooks I left behind in the life where I still believed helping him was the same as being loved. The efficiency model he announced as his breakthrough was there in my handwriting, dated 8 months before he said "I" on stage. The midnight fix that saved the Series B demo was there too, with a note in the margin. For Ethan, don't let them see you sweat. That was the part I hated most when he told me. Not that he had stolen from me. Theft can be named. Theft can be punished. I hated that I had loved him while handing him the tools. Vanessa tried to save herself before Ethan finished feeling ashamed. Vanessa found 2 buyers for the broken remains of Prometheus. Smaller, quieter, less glamorous than Vance Capital, but enough to get Ethan out with something before the company cratered. In my first life, those escape routes had worked. Vanessa was very good at exits. She always knew which door opened before the rest of us knew the room was on fire. This time, Sinclair-adjacent money had reached those buyers before she did. Her calls went nowhere. Then a 3rd buyer appeared. That had not happened in my first life. The offer came fast, aggressive, and strange. Real money for a wounded company. Too many questions about Helios contracts. Too much interest in which Sinclair documents had been frozen and which had not. I sat in my office with the alert glowing on my screen and felt the old map in my head tear at the corner. The future I remembered was already changing. That was the first honest fear. It is easy to be brave when you know where the knife will land. It is something else to keep walking after the room stops matching the memory. The 3rd buyer was Holt. Not directly, of course. Men like Marcus Holt do not write their names on dirty doors. But the money moved through shells that Julian's people traced in 46 hours, and by then, Vanessa was on a live-stream technology summit stage, smiling like she still owned the story. Before that broadcast, there was one afternoon when I almost made the mistake of thinking Ethan's ruin would be enough. I had gone back to the old apartment to collect the last files I still trusted on local drives. It was not stripped bare in this life, not yet. The sofa was still there. The wedding photograph still hung in the hallway. The one where Ethan looked victorious and I looked relieved. I stood in front of it longer than I meant to. There are humiliations you do not notice while you are inside them, because noticing would require you to move. In that photograph, Ethan's hand was not around my waist. It was on my shoulder. A small thing, a normal thing, maybe, to anyone else. But I could see it now. Not affection, not even possession, exactly. Presentation, like I was a detail he had arranged. The doorman called up before I found the drives. Diane Cole was downstairs. I almost told him to send her away. Then I remembered every dinner where she had smiled at me with sugar in her voice and contempt in her eyes. Every time she had corrected my place card from Olivia to Liv because the short name suits you better. Every time she had praised Vanessa for understanding pressure because women like me were better suited to comfort than consequence. Send her up, I said. She arrived wearing pearls and injury. Your husband is falling apart, she said, before the door fully closed. Former husband. Do not be childish. That almost made me laugh. Diane Cole had a gift for standing in a burning house and asking other people to mind the curtains. Ethan made mistakes, she said. Men do, especially men under pressure. But you and I both know you benefited from his name. Which name was that? She blinked. Cole, of course. Diane, until last week, half the people in his boardroom thought Liv was short for nothing at all. Her mouth tightened. You are enjoying this. No, I said. That is what bothers you. If I were enjoying it, you could call me bitter. If I were crying, you could call me unstable. I am simply finished. For once, she had no graceful answer. I opened the door for her myself. Tell Ethan something for me, I said. Her chin lifted, ready to carry a message she could reshape. Tell him I found the drives he forgot existed. Tell him the first Prometheus investor deck still has my file path in the metadata. Diane went very still. That was when I knew Ethan had never told his mother either. Not the whole truth. It comforted me in a way I did not admire. Even in his cowardice, he had wanted one person to keep believing he was the genius. You wouldn't, she said. I already did. I shut the door before she could decide whether to plead or threaten. That was the strange part of taking back a life. It was not one grand reversal. It was 100 small doors closing in faces that had grown used to entering without knocking. On the summit stage, Vanessa told the interviewer, "Let's be honest about what happened. Miss Sinclair's withdrawal was not strategy, it was a tantrum. An heiress got bored of playing founder's wife and decided to play founder." That line landed. I wish I could tell you everyone saw through it. They did not. People love a woman with hidden power after she wins. Before that, they prefer calling her emotional. It saves them from admitting they missed the obvious. Sinclair stock shuddered. A board ally who had eaten dinner at my grandmother's table for 20 years quietly signaled he was moving toward Holt's faction. 2 directors stopped returning calls. For the first time since I woke up in the wrong year, I was not just winning ugly. I was bleeding. I could stop it, but not cheaply. I signed away a personal Helios royalty stream I had built in secret over years. It was independent money. Untouchable by Ethan, by Sinclair politics, by the marriage. It was mine in the way a locked drawer is yours when you are young and tired, and need one thing in the world no one can take. I pledged it to buy back the wavering vote. Julian found me, after the numbers stabilized. I would have covered it, he said. I know. Then why didn't you call? I looked at the city below my window. In another life, I had wanted to own it. Now I wanted to survive it. If Vance rescues me, I become a woman saved by a powerful man. Every director in that building files me underhandled. If I save myself, bleeding, in public, I become a woman they will think twice before crossing again. Julian's jaw shifted, but he nodded. That is why I trusted him. He understood the price before arguing about it. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. One line. Your grandmother is very fragile, Miss Sinclair. Stop pulling threads. No signature. None needed. I set the phone face down gently, because I have always been careful with things I intend to destroy. Ethan came to my office 3 nights later. He looked as if sleep had become a rumor. His tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled, his face stripped of the expensive certainty that had once made people lean toward him at parties. Whatever I did, he said, name it. Name the apology, name the number, name the years. I'll fix it. For half a second, something in me flickered. Not love. Not anymore. The memory of having loved him. That is a different ghost, and sometimes meaner. You want to know what happened to us? I asked. Yes. So I let the evidence answer. I slid a tablet across the desk. Bank trails, messages, timelines, Vanessa's payments from Holt-linked accounts, the calendar of public humiliations she helped engineer, the sales schedule, the divorce filing planned for after the Vance announcement, when my name would be easier to erase from anything that still looked valuable. Ethan scrolled. He stopped breathing when the pattern reached my grandmother. Vanessa to Holt's office, 8 months earlier. Evelyn's situation needs to resolve before the succession window closes. The timing must look medical. One message alone would not have convicted anyone. The payments, access logs, medication changes, and emergency filings made it evidence. He read it once, then again, then a third time, as if repetition might make it less plain. She was going to kill your grandmother, he said. In another life, she did. The words slipped out before I could stop them. His eyes lifted. I took the tablet back. Do not ask me what that means. Olivia. No. He stood, desperate now. I'll testify. Against Vanessa. Against Holt. Board, court, press, whatever you need. I'll burn myself down if it helps. I swear I did not know about this. You didn't ask. He looked as if I had hit him. That was always your real talent, Ethan. Not cruelty. Never asking a question when the answer might cost you something. I almost let that be the last word. Then I said, "Go home. I'll tell you when I need the match." I did need him. I hated that. War is inconvenient that way. It does not let you keep your hands clean just because someone broke your heart. Ethan became a back channel. Board whispers, Holt communications, names of lawyers Vanessa had called from Prometheus offices. He gave me pieces because Ruin had finally made honesty cheaper than pride. I used them. I did not trust him. The pieces bought one real win, one of Holt's shell entities frozen, 1 week stolen from his clock. Enough time, I thought, to get my grandmother's documents secured and force the board back into session. Then Holt made a move that did not exist in my memory. An authorization appeared with a signature close enough to Evelyn's to pass a first review. An emergency vote was called in the single window where Julian's protective financing shifted between accounts for processing. One director defected, a man who in my first life had stayed loyal until the end. By noon, I was voted off the Sinclair board pending review. The injunction hardened from a freeze into a wall. On paper, I was again a woman with a famous name and no power behind it. Worse than that, my grandmother was gone. Transferred for her own care, the order said. Astor Vale Medical Center, a private facility with Holt's ownership buried 4 layers deep. The one person I had come back across death to save was behind a door I could not legally open, with a consulting physician already drafting the words, "not of sound mind." Julian found me in the emptied boardroom. For once, he was not calm. "I can get lawyers," he said. "Injunctions, press. I can buy time." "It's not enough." My hands were shaking. I hated that he saw it. I knew every move he would make, I said. That was my advantage. I had seen the game played to the end. "Live," Julian said. And I spent it. Every prediction, every advantage, gone. He's past the edge of the life I remember. The word that came next cost me more than I expected. "I'm blind." There it was. Not Olivia Sinclair, hidden genius. Not Liv Cole, wronged wife. Not the woman who had died once and come back with answers. Just a woman in a room, facing a man who was better at this moment than she was. My grandmother was in his building because I had been arrogant with a future I had already changed. I sat at the long table I used to own and felt the map in my head go blank. Rock bottom did not arrive like despair. It arrived like quiet. For several hours, I stopped trying to predict Marcus Holt. I stopped trying to force the world back into the shape of my first life. I stopped treating death as a cheat sheet. Then, I began doing what my grandmother had spent my childhood teaching me to do before I married a man who preferred me smaller. I made calls, not to the most important people, to the people Ethan had treated like furniture, the Helios engineers who had slept on office couches because I knew their children's names and sent food when demos ran late. The compliance counsel who had once watched me fix a filing problem Ethan never knew existed. The nurse at Astor Vale who had trained under a Sinclair scholarship and still sent my grandmother Christmas cards. The maintenance supervisor who knew which service doors opened during generator tests. The junior auditor Holt's people had bullied once too often. Power is not only a chair. Sometimes power is being remembered kindly by someone with a key. Julian sat beside me at the safe house table, not rescuing me, not taking over, just placing what he had beside what I had and asking better questions than most men can bear to ask a woman they admire. Ethan became the ugliest piece on the board, and maybe the most necessary. He walked through the front doors of Astor Vale wearing a maintenance shirt that did not fit and a wire taped under his collar. If anyone recognized him, they would see a fallen CEO doing something pathetic enough to be believable. That was the advantage of Ruin. People stop looking for strategy in a man they have already dismissed. He got the codes. The nurse got the schedule. The maintenance supervisor created 7 minutes of latency in the East Corridor cameras. The engineers mapped the access logs and proved Holt's consulting physician had entered restricted records before the transfer order was signed. I did not hack a hospital. I did not storm a building. I used every legitimate door Holt had assumed belonged only to men like him. There was a moment in the service corridor when the whole plan nearly ended because of a cart with a broken wheel. That is the kind of detail no one puts in stories about revenge. People like the clean version. The woman in black walks in, the doors open, the old queen is rescued, the villain's order collapses. But real power is uglier and more annoying. Real power is an engineer whispering that camera 7 is still live. It is a nurse pretending to spill saline because a guard is walking too slowly. It is me crouched beside a laundry cart, holding my breath while the wheels squealed like a warning bell. My grandmother, drugged but awake enough to be offended, hissed, "For heaven's sake, oil the thing." I almost laughed in the middle of the most dangerous 7 minutes of my life. Maybe that was what saved me from panic. Not courage, not destiny. My grandmother being impossible in a corridor where $500 million of legal pressure was trying to turn her into paperwork. My grandmother was awake when I reached her room. She looked small under fluorescent light. That frightened me more than the guards. "Took you long enough," she rasped. I almost laughed. "You were always hard to pick up from places." "Because I choose better places." We moved fast. Wheelchair, oxygen, service corridor, Julian's car waiting under the rain shelter, Ethan at the front desk making enough noise to keep the wrong people facing the wrong direction. In my bag, wrapped in a linen cover my grandmother had probably chosen 40 years earlier, was the packet Holt had burned 4 years trying to bury. The real will, the living trust, the voting proxy, medical directive, durable power, board authorization. Not magic papers, not one enchanted will that made an empire change hands with a flourish. A system, a chain. The kind of boring legal architecture men like Holt relied on other people not understanding. Evelyn had hidden it in the one place he never looked. Not a vault, her late husband's archive. Men like Holt respect safes and signatures. They rarely respect sentimental boxes labeled family correspondence. In Julian's car, my grandmother's color slowly returned. She gripped my hand with the strength of someone furious to still be mortal. "There she is," she said. "Who?" "The one I built. Not the one who married down and hid her light. That one." Her eyes closed. "Now finish him." The emergency board session convened in Holt's own territory because I wanted him to feel the floor move under a room he believed he had built. He arrived calm. Marcus Holt was not theatrical. That made him more dangerous. He did not threaten when a clause would do. He did not shout when a filing could choke a company. His suit was dark, his hair silver at the temples, his face arranged in the mild disappointment of a man forced to correct children. I had spent most of the night before that session rewriting my own testimony. The first version was angry. It listed every theft, every forged authorization, every transfer, every threat against my grandmother. It had the satisfying rhythm of a blade. Julian read it once and said nothing, which was how I knew it was bad. "Say it," I told him. "It sounds like you are asking them to believe your pain." "They should." "They should," he said. "They won't. Not first." I hated that he was right, so I rewrote it. No pleading. No adjectives where numbers would do. No asking anyone to understand what it felt like to watch my grandmother's signature turned into a cage. I gave them sequence, authority, timestamps, counterparties, medical access logs, and voting thresholds. Pain had brought me here. Procedure would open the door. That was the part of power Ethan never understood. He thought emotion made a woman weak. Holt thought the same thing, with better lawyers. Both of them missed the obvious. A woman can feel everything and still put the documents in the correct order. He had built his campaign on one assumption: Evelyn Sinclair would be dead, drugged, or declared unfit before her real documents saw daylight. I gave him the opposite. First, Evelyn entered. Not walking. That would have been too much theater, and she hated theater when she could use contempt. She came in a wheelchair under her own sharp gaze, flanked by 2 independent physicians and a judge's clerk with every record already time-stamped. The foundation of Holt's structure cracked the moment she opened her mouth. "Marcus," she said, as if addressing a waiter who had brought the wrong wine, "you have aged badly." The room went still. Then the documents. Not waved, not shouted. Read into the record. Verified by compliance counsel. Matched to prior board authorizations, medical directives, proxy language, and trust amendments. Power, like my grandmother said, is never one document. Then the trail. 4 years of shell companies, the injunction funding, the forged authorization, the market pressure on Sinclair stock, Vanessa's payments, the facility transfer, the physician's access logs, the board defection. Holt had used procedure like a knife. I used the blood on the handle. One by one, his directors leaned away from him. It was subtle, a shoulder turning, a pen set down, a counsel asking to clarify something for the record. Anyone who has watched power move knows the sound it makes when it leaves a man. "You stole a corpse," I told him. "I let you reach for it long enough to put your fingerprints on it." His composure finally cracked at the edge. "You think paperwork beats me?" "No," I said. "I think you do. You spent years teaching a quiet little wife how men pry an empire out of a woman's hands. The freeze, the isolation, the buried document, the friendly doctor, the helpful guardian." I leaned forward. I was paying attention this time. His phone was confiscated before he reached the door. Mine buzzed as they removed him from the room. "Vanessa." Not a call, a message. "I still have originals about your grandmother. Bury me and I burn her name down with mine." Vanessa Reed made her last stand where she had always done her best damage, in public, under lights, with enough witnesses to confuse humiliation with truth. It was an industry awards gala. By then, the story had begun turning in my favor, which meant people who had laughed at me carefully now wanted credit for having sensed my importance early. They came with compliments polished like borrowed jewelry. They called me resilient, strategic, surprising. Surprising is what people call you when they did not bother to look. Vanessa walked to the podium uninvited. She looked radiant in the way desperate women sometimes do when they have mistaken attention for oxygen. "Before you crown Olivia Sinclair," she said into the microphone, "ask what she had to hide. Ask what happened to the people who stood between her and power. Ask what she is willing to bury about her own grandmother." I stood slowly. "By all means," I said, "show them." Every screen in the ballroom changed. Not to the files Vanessa thought she controlled, to the ones she had made. Her messages to Holt, her payments, her notes about my marriage, her timeline for isolating me from Ethan, cheapening Helios access, keeping Prometheus dependent, and making Evelyn's decline look natural. The message about my grandmother's heart appeared last. Clean. Her word, not mine. The silence that followed did not belong to shock. Shock moves. This was the kind of silence that calcifies around a person when a room decides it no longer wants to be seen standing near her. 2 unremarkable men in unremarkable suits moved from the back of the ballroom toward the stage. Fraud and conspiracy do not always arrive with sirens. Sometimes they arrive politely, after dessert. Vanessa looked for Ethan. He was there, at the edge of the room, hollowed out, watching the woman he had chosen understand that he could not save her, and the woman he had thrown away not needing him to. As they escorted Vanessa down the steps, she turned toward me. "He will never love you the way he loved me," she said. It was a sad little weapon, the kind she had used when she still thought the prize was Ethan. "He is not the one I'm leaving with," I said. I walked past her. Diane Cole half rose from her seat as I passed. Not fully. Pride held the rest of her down, but the movement was there, an aborted little bow her body made before her class instincts could stop it. I let her keep the shame. By morning, Holt's network was collapsing in the financial press. Vanessa's career had become evidence. Prometheus was being dismantled and rebuilt around its surviving pieces. Sinclair held the chair, the will, the votes, and the medical record Holt had tried to turn into a weapon. And Ethan came to my grandmother's veranda one last time. He did not try to enter the house. That mattered. He waited on the stone steps until I came out. The sun was low. Evelyn sat behind me with a blanket over her knees, pretending not to listen while obviously listening to everything. Ethan lowered himself to his knees. Not theatrically. Not the way men kneel when they want the room to admire their pain. His legs simply seemed to stop carrying him. "I'm not asking to come back," he said. Good, I thought. But I let him continue. "You were the best thing I ever had, and I made you small so I could feel large beside you. I wore your mind like a coat. I called you quiet because I was afraid of what people would see if you spoke. I let Vanessa flatter every cowardly part of me because she never asked me to be worthy of what I was holding." His voice broke once. He did not use it to ask for comfort. That was new. "I am sorry," he said. "If the only forgiveness on offer is the kind that does not come with you, I will take it. Gladly. I just needed to say it where it costs me something." For a long moment, I let myself feel the whole shape of it. The 3 years. The girl in the gray dress. The woman on the bare floor. The wife who waited for a man to choose her while he spent her brilliance building a room where he could pretend she was ordinary. I crouched, so we were eye to eye. Gentleness is dangerous when someone has mistaken it for a door before. "I forgive you, Ethan." He closed his eyes. "Not because you earned it," I said. "Because I died once carrying you, and I refuse to spend a second life doing it again." His eyes opened. "Forgiveness is not a second chance," I said. "You do not get to apologize your way back into a life you set on fire to keep yourself warm." He flinched, but he stayed. That was new too. "Get up," I said. "Build something small and honest. Become a man some other woman is lucky to have. That is the kindest thing I will ever give you, and it is the last." He stayed on his knees after I stood. For the first time, I think he understood the size of what was gone. Julian waited at the end of the veranda, hands in his pockets, not pushing, not gloating, not rescuing, just there. He had been there in one form or another since we were children moving chess pieces on that same stone. He had not made himself the hero of my story. That was why he remained in it. I walked to him. "Took you 20 years to notice me," he said. "Took me dying once." Dramatic. Accurate. He smiled, and I took his arm. Behind us, Evelyn closed her eyes in the last light and looked, for once in her life, entirely satisfied. 1 year later, there is still a chessboard on that veranda. The company I built is no longer hidden under Ethan's name. Helios Cloud stands openly beside Sinclair Capital. Prometheus survives only in pieces worth saving, and the best engineers from that wreck came with me because people remember how they were treated when the world was not watching. The same magazines that once put Ethan on the cover put me there now. Architect. That was the word they chose. Not heiress, not wife, not surprise. Architect. Inside every major release, under my own name, sits another, Evelyn Sinclair, who built it first. She read that dedication twice before she died. The first time she complained that the font was too sentimental. The second time she cried and blamed the wind. Ethan runs a small company 2 cities away. Nothing glamorous. No cover stories. No billion-dollar exit. He builds slowly, and from what I hear, honestly. Once a year, on the anniversary of the gala, he sends one message. Still sorry. Still grateful. I never reply. He never expects me to. That, at last, is a man who understands what asking costs. Julian brings coffee to the veranda every morning he can get away with pretending he does not have an empire of his own to run. He loses at chess more often than a man of his reputation should admit. "You're going to lose," I tell him, advancing my queen. I usually do. That never bothered you? I like the view. I look at the board, then at him. That line is terrible. I know. I've been saving it for 25 years. For a moment, the world is absurdly ordinary. Sun on stone, Coffee going cold. A man I trust across the board. My grandmother's roses refusing to die where she planted them. My own name on the documents, the buildings, the work. I spent one life being the woman no one looked at twice. I spent the next becoming impossible to ignore. That afternoon, my phone buzzes on the arm of the chair. Unknown number. One line. Marcus Holt did not build that cage alone. There is a third name on Evelyn Sinclair's original file, and he is coming home. I read it once. Julian watches my face. Bad? I set my queen down on the square that ends the game. Not boring. He reaches for the phone. I let him read it. The old fear does not rise the way it used to. There is no map from a dead life this time. No cheat sheet, no prophecy, no certainty. Only my name, my chair, my people, and the lessons I paid for in blood. I stand. Pour another cup, I tell Julian. For me? For whoever thinks he is coming home to a house no woman owns. Julian smiles slowly. Below the veranda, the city catches the light. This time, it does not look indifferent. It looks like a board waiting for my first move.